Well then, let me say hello everyone. I'm pleased to have this opportunity to introduce you to my book, The Stability of Society, published by Springer earlier this year. However, before saying some words about the book itself, it is probably best if I outline, even if only very briefly and sketchily, the view of society on which the book is based, as it is somewhat different to what you would be used to. This view arises as a combination of three ideas. The first idea is that the evolution of society can be seen as the current stage of an ongoing process that started with the Big Bang and progressed through a number of stages, each one converting free energy into bound energy and creating entities of increasing complexity. Leaving out the very early period, we can start with the combination of electrons, protons, and neutrons into increasingly complex atoms, then atoms into increasingly complex molecules, then molecules into increasingly complex cells, then cells into increasingly complex organisms, and then organisms into increasingly complex entities of cooperating organisms, of which human societies are the outstanding example. If we consider human society as a genus, then the different societies that have arisen since we left the cave are the species of this genus. And the evolution of this species shows the same increase in complexity as did the evolution in the earlier stages. The second idea is that everything we do is based on the information available to us at the time of action, either stored information or information received at the time of action, so that we can view society as a giant distributed information processing system, consisting of individuals as the processors and the interaction between them in the form of information exchange, forming the collection of individuals into a system with its unique emergent properties. A simplification is to assume that the human processing ability has remained essentially unchanged over, say, 10,000 years or so that the evolution of society is the evolution of the interaction, its composition, its reach, its intensity, its quality, etc. The third idea is to view the activities taking place within society as contained in two separate but closely interacting cycles. The economic cycle contains all those activities that result in the creation and maintenance of our physical environment, and measured in such terms as GDP and capital formation, but also in such terms as the satisfaction of the lower levels of Maslow's hierarchy. The other cycle, the transformation cycle, is concerned with the activities that are related to our beliefs, with the things that matter to us and that we are willing to make a sacrifice for, and in the final analysis, with survival. It is called the transformation cycle because it is these activities that change or mutate one species of society into another. Just increasing the GDP does not mean a different species of society. And of course, the information, both its content and processing, is subdivided accordingly. And so it is only the information associated with the transformation cycle that is of interest to us. Now, this brief outline of my view of society may have created more questions than understanding. So in order to leave some time for questions and discussion, let me now just say a few words about the book. Firstly, the stage-wise evolution of society through a sequence of species, such as, for example, family, clan, tribe, fiefdom, kingdom, and nation, has in each stage been driven, at least to a significant extent, by the net benefit of cooperation within the species in competition with other units of the same species. That sequence has now, with the world arranged into more or less cohesive and stable nation states, come to an end. And for us to form a world society of United Nations, there is no external entity to compete with and survive against as a motivation for cooperation. Secondly, we are at the end of a particular phase in the social evolution. Up until about 1450 AD, separate societies had evolved in different parts of the world. Western Europe, China, India, Central and South America, and so on. But at that time, for various well-known reasons, one part of the world, what developed into what we now call the West, was able to develop a hegemonic position and exploit, often brutally, the rest of the world. That phase is now at an end. But the result is that this small part of the world, say 1 billion people out of 7 billion, have a standard of living several times higher than the rest. This inequality, together with the lack of a unifying external threat, poses a significant risk of instability, possibly in the form of armed conflict. Of course, there are several internal unifying threats: global warming, destruction of the environment, pandemics, etc. But it remains to be seen how effective they are. The book considers this current situation within the view of society as an information processing system, as outlined above, paying particular attention to the power of the media in influencing the information and the concentration of the control of that power in a very small group of individuals. Thank you. Now for questions.
Erik, if you don't mind, I'd like to ask a question.
Yes, please.
Yeah, could I ask what your sort of, you obviously ended here with a bit of a normative component in the sense that you outlined the kind of growing inequality that exists, and you use the term world society. Obviously, there are certain kinds of political circumstances that may or may not necessarily kind of support that development. Are you suggesting that the quicker we sort of attend to the world and society as information processing, right, that the kernel of society is a kind of ever increasing and ever kind of complexifying information processing endeavor, that we would somehow get to a possibility of a world society, as you put it?
Well, yes, I would have to say. I've introduced something which I couldn't discuss here because of lack of time, but this circulation of information among everyone, if that is not impeded in any way, that circulation will result in something I call the collective intelligence. And I believe that the solution that would result from that consideration by everybody and the free circulation of information would actually result in the best way forward. What that way is impossible to say. It's impossible to say what society will be in the future. I think, for instance, it's going to be very different. A few hundred years from now, with genetic engineering, even we won't look anything like what we look today. But never mind. This idea of the circulating information and ability of humans to find a way for that, actually essentially the ability to survive is essential. And anything that disturbs or perverts or controls for a certain purpose, that circulation of information is likely to lead to a fluctuation in the forward development of the world society. Now, as to your question about, of course, there are lots of political issues that enter into this. And of course, the way, if you look at the world today, the way it might go into, not into a nation, a society of nations, with the nations as the individuals in the society, but into a society of blocks, say 5 or 10 blocks in the world that form with more closely aligned interests, and they cooperate under some form. There will need to be some form of overarching authority in the way, let's say, like the United Nations, which would be then not United Nations, but maybe United Alliances or something like that. So there are many different or several different ways forward. I think the least likely, but the most ideal one would be the world society.
Does anyone else have a question for Erik? You've still got a little bit of time, Erik. Got 13 minutes.
Good. Well, I'm happy to answer anything.
I'm not an academic. I do have a degree in sociology, not an academic. And it may be the cynic in me, but I can't imagine every culture and every society around the world coming together as one.
No, you're quite right. That's unlikely. But when you look in say, in a nation, look how different people are. You say, it's impossible that all these people can come together and form a nation. How could they? They are Christians, Jews, Muslims, violent people, Pacific people. They're all there, but they do form a nation. It's possible. We have formed nations.
It's a good point.
I'm not sure the difference between nations is any greater than the difference between people within nations, necessarily.
I guess if we're having some sort of overarching leadership.
Well, that's true. Now, of course, you might wish for that some brilliant person might arise and sort of make everyone want to follow him, like, you know, another version of Jesus or something. I think that's, you know, highly unlikely, and I think also very dangerous, because what we have seen is that, you know, what about power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. That idea of the brilliant leader is very dangerous. I think a much better is the democracy, which is the ideal democracy is actually each person contributing equally and being able to contribute to the public discourse. That's one of the very sad things about our present society, is the way the public discourse has sort of deteriorated into triviality, advertising, and actually hardly a serious idea being put forward, and certainly no discussion of it. There's no real media. I mean, tap a like on Twitter or Facebook or something. That's not participating in the public discourse. So that, I think, and then the control of the media and the use of the media for driving consumerism and for driving simply the engine of capitalism forward is very very doubtful or dubious way that it's going. I think that's we would think that with electronic media, wow, this is going to be fantastic. We could actually have everybody participating here, but that's not what happens.
Mm.
And the thing is not that you are not allowed to say what you want. You are. Look in America, for instance, that's the most free nation of any nation. People say anything they like practically, but it matters nothing. You can shout as much as you like, but that's not heard because you're completely overpowered by a million other voices generated by the same authority.
Mm.
Yeah.
Interesting. I'll just check in. I can see Annette is online. She's on mute. I don't know whether Annette, did you want to ask a question?
Hi. No, I just thought I'd drop in because I have some time and I was, just listening.
So I'm just sort of the last resort.
No.
As an aside, Annette, I like your image there with your sociology books.
Yes.
I see you have
I do like book launches, so I'm a bit of like, I'll jump into a book launch wherever I can.
I see you have quite a few books stacked up there on the photo.
Annette's just finished
Yes.
her undergrad in sociology.
Congrats, Annette.
Thank
Eric,
you.
could I ask something here?
Oh, of course.
Please.
Yeah, I was wondering whether you're familiar with sort of other conceptualizations of the notion of collective intelligence. In particular, I'm thinking of the work of the French philosopher Pierre Levy, who wrote quite a bit in the 1990s about the notion of collective intelligence from a sort of Durkheimian perspective. And one of the things that I think is quite useful in Levy's work is the way in which he defines information in a particular way. And I was wondering whether you could sort of kind of offer up how you define information. Is it sort of the classic cybernetics definition of information as difference that makes a difference? Is information any sort of input? Is it any sort of stimulus? Just curious about what your sort of working definition of information is here.
Well, my in more detail, the definition of information is just simply information items, and each information item is and I'm only interested in information, not like the value of pi or anything like that. I'm interested in information relating to beliefs, to things that are subject to persuasion. And I see that as a statement and an assertion, and then supports of that assertion. So something is such and such because, and then you give your support of that assertion. It's a wealth of information items of that nature. They are processed in the human brain. You're probably familiar with the work of Tversky and Kahneman, and it's fast and slow and so on. Here, I look at it more as information that is in accordance with what you believe, or just adds to it, or information that is in conflict with what you believe and which has to be processed in order to resolve those conflicts. So I see within a person, the individual processor, a level of stress which arises from the number of unsolved conflicts. And that, of course, depends on the rate at which you can resolve conflicts and the rate at which conflicting items arrive. So I've looked at the dynamics of that. And that's sort of my view. My view of information processing is strictly one, sort of like the human brain, more or less like a computer. It has a lot to do with computers, and the main memory and cache is in the computer the same as the things that you can access very easily and the one things that you have to search more for. And but I was very interested in, I'm not familiar with the name that you gave me. Could you tell me once more this person that has
Sure,
written?
I'll type it in the chat so that you can see. It's Pierre Levy.
Oh, Pierre Levi. Okay, Levy. I'll look. I am not familiar with him, but I shall certainly look it up. Thank you very much for that reference. I'm always interested in finding new relevant material. That's good. Yes. So what's your particular interest, Sam, in this area?
I would say the first kind of 2 books of mine were about kind of bringing critical media theory into social theory. So a lot of my work has overlap in terms of, understanding the impact of technology on society. So yeah, a lot of my work is sort of my kind of earlier work has always been on sort of bringing in or kind of justifying the importance of media theory into social theory. So that's sort of where a lot of my interest lies here.
Okay, you would be familiar with the work of Schiller.
Yes.
Yeah, for instance, I've been very interested in that work, and that's one of, I mean, that's a major concern, as you understand. Is this the media and the control of the media and the means of modifying what we see and therefore slowly modifying what we believe. Yeah, no, I'm very familiar with the work of Schiller and a number of other people that have been concerned with that. Yeah. So I guess we're getting close, but I'm still, any other questions, I'd be happy to answer.